Well, now for a change of pace, the head of RaboResearch Global Economics and Markets UK, Jan Lambregts, will explore the top 10 macroeconomic trends for this era. And this isn't your usual macroeconomics presentation.
Thank you, Pip. Good morning, farm to fork. My name is Jan Lambregts. In my day job, I am the head of markets research for Rabobank. But today, I'd like for you to think of me as your DJ, as I'll take you to 10 records, 10 hits, 10 key trends for the years ahead. And we'll start with number 10. Now, this is a synthesizer greatest, I'm afraid, and a bit of a rude one, but one that you must have all been talking about at the coffee machine or at home, the family, with your friends. AI, in this case, ChatGPT. Now, I happen to think that part of my career, at least, is based on the fact that I'm pretty good with Google, but I'll have to get pretty good with ChatGPT of something comparable. Now, I hear a few people respond to this, and a common response I hear is, I've managed to ask the chatbot a question that it doesn't know how to answer. Those people should be careful, because this is just version 3.0 after all. So once we get to 4.0, 5.0, don't miss the bigger point. This is coming. We've made big leaps here. The bar is being raised. Similarly, I had a session in my team, and people said ChatGPT seems to be particularly good at making drab pieces of reportage. I said, well, to be fair, quite a few people around me seem to be pretty good at that as well. So if that's all you can do, you should be worried, right? I completely agree that's where it is right now, but what do you bring to the table? So the bar's being raised, and at the same time, the bar's being lowered. Because the big key challenge we're going to face as a nation is, how do you know who's now a real expert? I think we've all grown tired of the uncle who's an armchair virologist during COVID. But now, backed up with this bot, he or she may sound very, very smart, right? So that's going to be a real challenge there going forward. But think of it as a digital assistant. I'm quite excited to work with it. You'll have to learn to work with it, because that's the key to success. Up until previously, a party favorite, crypto. Now we're going to use the wisdom of Winston Churchill on this one. And of course, Winston Churchill famously said, I have nothing to offer you but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. He didn't say, I have nothing to offer you but NFTs of monkeys with sunglasses. So that some thought you could actually run the world on that shows you how long we've had low interest rates and how much harm it's really cost, right? Now, there's good news when it comes to crypto. And I understand there may be some personal gain, and you may have already guessed that I'm not invested in crypto. But the good news about crypto is that crypto is a circular firing squad. Crypto invests in crypto. FTX, the platform, went under, and it turns out that we were investing in all sorts of other crypto projects. It doesn't seem like any traditional lender is involved, and that's good news, because else you have to bail them out, as we now know. But that is the world of crypto at the moment. Now, typically at this moment, someone goes, I love crypto, but I can see that, but I really love the distributed ledger technology amongst that. Distributed ledger technology is an IT security protocol. It's been around a long time. It's not that exciting, and no one ever gets excited normally about IT security protocols. So even there, I'm sort of skeptical on that one. By all means, develop it, but don't ask me about to cheer for it. So I think this one will at some point drop quickly out of the top 10 unless it's central bank digital currency, which is of course where the government comes in. Let's get a bit more serious. Yeah, the era of soft power is over. And that's bad news for Europe, which specializes in it. We're back in a great power struggle. It's uncomfortable. The global architecture is reshifting and being reordered under our very eyes. It offers lots of opportunities, but also lots of threats. We could talk about this for a long time, but I'm summarizing sort of three areas that I would focus on at the moment. There's the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion. Our view there is that this will last. Both Ukraine and Russia have an incentive to keep fighting. That's unfortunate. It likely leads to a frozen conflict and an impact on the world that's negative for a long time to come. Next to that is the big story of our time, the Cold War between the US and China. We first started talking and writing about this in 2017, 2018. At the time we got a lot of pushback. We no longer get pushback. In fact, people actually ask me, where are your Taiwan scenarios? People are awake now after what happened in Ukraine. What's happening here is nothing short of an economic proxy war. Xi Jinping and China are saying we're being contained by the US, and they are. They're being encircled. The economic proxy war is most visible when it comes to high-end semiconductors, chips, and the equipment to make them. The US is literally cutting off China from access to that. That is hurting China's ambition to become a leader in these sectors greatly. And the only economic equivalent of it that I can think of is 1941, when the US bans gas and oil exports to Japan after Japan invaded French Indochine. So this is a full-on economic proxy war. And the basic message is everyone will have to choose sides, right? I think in Australia and New Zealand, we're pretty much there. You know which side you're on, but that means real implications for business. A question mark still, for example, what side Brazil's on. And most try to play both sides. That's what Europe would like, that's what Brazil would like, but it's going to be exceedingly hard. Underneath that, the last risk I see, and this is a tail risk, but an uncomfortable one, it's the risk that Iran develops nuclear weapons and that Israel strikes at it before it does develop that. This would be probably a unilateral strike. It could be of any sorts, but it could be one where it doesn't consult the US, starts a war, and drags the US into a new war with the Middle East. Uncomfortable, but increasingly on the radar there. In the metaphor of our musical collection, you have to decide which collection you want to belong to. Here in Australia, of course, it's AUKUS, right? It's the alliance there with the US, UK, into Japan. Europe tries to be strategically independent, but that's very, very hard to pull off. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Belarus, they are forming their own collection there as a counterweight. Now, why do I have demographics here? For various reasons. Aging populations create different dynamics, and that feeds into the labor market story. But most importantly, extreme demographics are a real input for geopolitics. It's no coincidence that Russia and China have terrible demographics and are big geopolitical actors. Time's ticking for them, and if you have ambitions, you have to be quick. If you look at some of the birth rates that are plunging, particularly in China, then one thing should be certain for the past couple of years. Whatever people were doing during COVID, it wasn't making babies. Now, a lot of the problems come together here in the labor markets, right? We'll talk a little bit more about linked problems to that later. But isn't it ironic that we got low unemployment, high wage growth, and yet everyone's worried about it, even though we've been hoping for this for a long time? Someone's got to explain this to me. Now, of course, a bit tongue-in-cheek, the bigger issue here is that following COVID, we're very confused about the labor market. It's tight almost everywhere. It's particularly tight here in Australia. It's extremely tight in New Zealand. But it's a story that's happening in the US and Europe to some extent there as well. I can come up with various reasons, but at the same time, I also know that this is not just it. We have Ukraine to deal with, the world being reordered, re-globalization rather than de-globalization. So still an international world, but with different allies partnering up. It's a genie that will be hard to put back in the bottle, and the labor market is key for the next factor. Because if we have to reorder the world, we need a plan. And that plan increasingly will be full-on industrial policy. We had that in the past, but we're going to get it back. Loose monetary policy has arguably failed. Loose fiscal policy has worked way too well. And that's why there's been so much demand for goods and services. But now, faced with challenges that range from resilience, that we need to increase, national security concerns, protectionism that's back, and a green push, we need a plan behind that. And you can think, of course, and if you try to put the pieces together, then banks will be dragged into that as well. And other companies will be dragged into it. A full-on industrial policy to address this, with the government directing it as well, while the labor markets are already tight. So you can see the challenge they're coming through in terms of the inflationary impact that would have. Now, this is one where I don't have to make the argument. The argument is being made for me. You can just see it pop up in the headlines across the news. Everyone's working on that, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHICT app, it just keeps going. And China's also responding on that front. The world's trying to position itself. And it all comes back in inflation. Inflation's back. It's likely to be sticky. It's not going to be double digit. It's going to come off. But inflation will probably be 3-4% rather than 2% or 1.5% what we're growing used to. Inflation has also moved from durable goods to services. Right? So that means it is again more sticky. First, we bought everything we could buy in terms of products, because we were in COVID, we couldn't enjoy the services, and now we're buying everything in services. And this is happening while we need to reject the economy, while we're in a proxy war amongst many battlefields virtually. That is quite the challenge coming through. What's most important for this, though, to understand is that inflation has a dirty secret. Inflation is a delta. It's a year-on-year. If you increase energy prices by 100% but don't do anything, that's only a one-time input. The lasting motor for inflation is almost always wage demands. And wages, nominal wage demands, are up. They're not as up as much as inflation, so real wages are lagging. But if nominal wages are sticky at 4 or 5%, you've created a new inflation monster for years to come. And that's where the central banks came in. Rates. They said they wouldn't, but they did. They said they couldn't, but they did. And even in the face of a banking crisis globally, with medium-sized banks in the Netherlands, not the Netherlands, in the US failing, and in Europe, a major systemic bank failing, still rates go up. 50 basis points last week, the ECB, 25 basis points earlier today, the Fed. Right? They're trying to divorce it from financial stability, but they're also admitting, at least the Fed did, that they are nervous. They have plenty of tools to deal with this. The banks are well capitalized, but this is fractional reserve banking. If people lose confidence, it doesn't matter what the fundamentals are, you need to suddenly step in. And this seamlessly links up with a government that's going to be more active there. Central banks are going to try and push the rates further. The best way to think of this is that they're fighting inflation in the real economy and superimposed on that is a financial economy where they probably see the cracks appearing first before inflation really comes off. Whether it's crypto, FTX, Liz Truss trying to implement policies and the pension funds running into trouble with their derivative portfolios, or recently banks wobbling. It's happening, but rates for the moment are still going up to fight that inflation monster. And that means the people are not happy. Even though people are working hard, they all have jobs, which helps. Inflation is eroding their real spending opportunities. And politicians will have to come up with an answer for that. And to be honest, at the moment, they're probably struggling. There's plenty of flavors they can choose, from the very local anarchism, libertarianism, to other belief systems. And I had to add imperialism to that a year ago as the Russians invaded Ukraine. The bottom line is, I can't tell you how politics will change, but I can tell you that those who promise it will change are probably going to be popular, and that will make it a whole lot harder to do business. And at number one, and one we just heard of, and we're going to hear of a whole lot more, the climate crisis, but in general, the whole push for more sustainability. We need to invest more, but the energy transition, if I just focus on energy for a moment, isn't going to come in time to deal with the energy crisis. We need to simultaneously to bridge the gap invest in fossil fuel. And if you think that's anathema, or really strange for me to say, in the background they're already firing up the coal plants, they're burning wood, they're doing everything they can because the crisis is real. For the moment, invest in both. For the long-term future, invest in durable and sustainable. That's it. That's my top 10. I want to leave you, though, also with some advice, because I can imagine that you're saying there's a whole lot of challenges and opportunities. What do I do best with that? Well, the first thing I'd leave you with is it's very tempting to think of all of these as a series of one-hit wonders, as a series of unfortunate events that just happen to happen on your watch as leaders and as entrepreneurs. But the reality is they're actually connected. They form a mega crisis or mega challenge, if you will. And the solution to that is to become more resilient, to become more anti-fragile, to invest not in trying to perfectly forecast the future, but to be prepared for multiple futures. If you do that successfully, then you will stay on the billboard, whatever and wherever musical fashions will go. And I'll leave you with the wisdom of Malcolm and Angus Young, who 50 years ago, or almost 50 years ago, in 1973, formed their band here in Sydney. It is a long way to the top, but you can make it there, as you've proven. Thank you very much.
It's a long way.